He shielded an alien child from gunfire. Days later, her mother's army came for him. The distress beacon screamed across every frequency Tobias Mercer's freighter could receive. He'd been running dark through the threshold sector, 3 days from the nearest station with a hold full of medical supplies that weren't exactly legal but weren't quite contraband either. The kind of cargo that kept independent haulers like him fed but never wealthy. The beacon cut through his music, through his careful isolation, demanding attention with the universal emergency code that meant lives hung in the balance. Tobias killed the music and brought his sensors online. 2 signatures, 1 small civilian craft, its power fluctuating, 1 larger vessel with weapon signatures hot and getting hotter. "Damn it," he muttered, already plotting the intercept course. His freighter, the Wandering Star, wasn't built for heroics. She was 70 years old, held together with welds and stubbornness, and her weapons consisted of a single deterrent cannon that hadn't been fired in 5 years. But his hands moved across the controls anyway, pushing the aging engines toward the firefight. The scene materialized on his viewport as he dropped out of FTL. The small craft tumbled through space, atmosphere venting from a dozen holes in its hull. The attacking ship was sleek, black, bristling with military-grade hardware that made Tobias's throat tighten. These weren't opportunistic raiders. They were professionals. He watched them line up another shot, their targeting lasers painting the crippled vessel's cockpit. Through his scope, he caught a glimpse of movement behind the damaged viewport. Small, child-sized. Tobias didn't think. His hands flew across the controls, throwing the Wandering Star between the attacker and their prey. The first volley slammed into his forward shields, making every alarm in the cockpit shriek. His teeth rattled. The second volley hit harder, and he felt the shield generators strain under his feet. "Come on, you bastards," he growled, keeping his freighter steady. "I'm right here." They obliged. Weapons fire hammered his shields in a steady rhythm, professional and patient. They were trying to disable him, he realized, which meant they wanted something from that civilian craft badly enough to avoid creating debris fields and destroying evidence. His shields collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. The next impact punched through his cargo bay, and he felt the ship shudder. Oxygen alarms joined the symphony of warnings. Tobias sealed the cargo bay and fired his deterrent cannon. It was like throwing rocks at a warship, but it bought him seconds. Enough to activate his emergency maneuvering thrusters and bring his ship alongside the damaged civilian craft. Close enough that the attackers couldn't fire without risking both vessels. "Magnetic locks engaged," his computer announced in its infuriatingly calm voice. He was already out of his seat, pulling on his emergency pressure suit with practiced speed. The airlock cycled. The civilian craft's hull pressed against his own, and he activated his cutting torch, carving through the damaged airlock seal. The torch broke through. Atmosphere rushed past him into vacuum, and he pushed through into chaos. The interior was small, elegant, designed for luxury rather than utility. Now it was a coffin. Emergency lights cast everything in red, a body floated near the cockpit, adult, feline features, 3 parallel cuts across the throat. Professional. Quick. Movement in the corner caught his eye. She was small, maybe 4 feet tall, covered in white fur that seemed to glow in the emergency lighting. Her ears were pressed flat against her skull, her eyes wide and luminous. Feline, like the dead guardian, but younger. So much younger. She'd wedged herself into a storage compartment, and her small hands gripped a piece of torn metal like a weapon. "Hey," Tobias said softly, keeping his hands visible. "I'm here to help." She hissed, showing needle-sharp teeth. The ship shuddered. The attackers were trying to separate them, he realized, trying to pry the vessels apart. "We don't have time for this," he said, moving slowly toward her. "They're coming back." Her ears twitched. She understood him, or at least understood the urgency in his voice. Those enormous eyes tracked his every movement. He stopped just outside her hiding spot and crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "My name's Tobias. I have a ship right next door, and it's a lot harder to kill than this one, but we need to move, now." The hull groaned, metal screamed. She launched herself at him, all claws and desperation, climbing his pressure suit like a tree. Her small hands found his shoulders, his neck, holding on with a strength that surprised him. He could feel her trembling. "Got you," he said, standing carefully. "I've got you." The airlock exploded inward. Two figures in combat armor pushed through, weapons raised. Tobias saw the barrels swing toward them, saw fingers tighten on triggers, and his body moved before his mind caught up. He turned, putting himself between the child and the weapons, wrapping his arms around her small body as the first shots fired. The impacts drove him backward. His pressure suit took the first 3 rounds, the armor plating doing exactly what it was designed to do. The 4th round caught him in the ribs where the plating had gaps for flexibility, and white-hot pain erupted across his side. He kept moving, through the pain, through the smoke, through the ringing in his ears. His emergency thruster pack activated, responding to his neural implant, and he rocketed backward through the airlock. The child's claws dug into his suit, into his skin beneath, but he barely felt it. The attackers followed, but Tobias was already slamming his hand against the emergency release. The airlock door screamed shut, and he triggered the magnetic locks. The Wandering Star separated from the civilian craft with a grinding crash. He tumbled into his cockpit, the child still clinging to him, and threw himself into the pilot's seat. His hands found the controls through muscle memory, through training older than his ship. The FTL drive spun up, protesting, but obeying. The attacking ship fired everything it had. Tobias felt impacts hammer his aft section, felt systems die, but the FTL drive held. Reality twisted, stretched, and the Wandering Star leaped away from the ambush, carrying them into the safety of faster-than-light travel. In the sudden silence, Tobias became aware of the child still wrapped around him, her face buried against his shoulder, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Blood soaked through his pressure suit from the wound in his side, warm and sticky. "It's okay," he said, though he wasn't sure which of them he was trying to convince. "We're safe now." The computer chimed. Course plotted for Meridian Station, the nearest outpost. 3 days at their damaged FTL speed. Tobias reached up with one hand, carefully stroking the child's head between her ears. She didn't pull away. Her claws remained embedded in his suit, in him, as if letting go meant falling into an abyss. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. Maybe she couldn't speak his language. Maybe she was too terrified. He let it go, focusing instead on keeping them alive, on monitoring their damaged systems, on ignoring the growing pool of blood in his seat. The child's grip never loosened. Not when he finally peeled off his helmet. Not when he managed to seal his wound with a medical kit he could barely reach. Not when exhaustion dragged at him and he set the autopilot, trusting the computer to wake him if anything went wrong. She stayed wrapped around him like a lifeline, this small alien child who'd watched her guardian die, who'd nearly been killed herself, who now clung to a stranger who'd thrown himself between her and death. 3 days to Meridian Station, 3 days to figure out who she was, who wanted her dead badly enough to use military hardware, and what the hell he was supposed to do with her. Tobias closed his eyes, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Too fast, too frantic. His own heart wasn't much steadier. He'd saved her life. He knew that much. What he didn't know was that he'd just changed the fate of 2 civilizations. The Wandering Star limped through FTL space, carrying its unlikely cargo toward Meridian Station. Behind them, in normal space, the attacking ship transmitted a single message on an encrypted channel. 3 words that would have meant nothing to Tobias, but everything to those who received them. The air survived. 72 hours later, when Meridian Station's sensors detected the massive energy signatures dropping out of FTL space, when alarms screamed across every frequency and station personnel scrambled for emergency protocols, when the largest fleet humanity had ever witnessed surrounded their small outpost like predators circling prey, Tobias was still in the medical bay. The child, he'd learned her name was Sarah, though she'd only whispered it once, refused to leave his side even as the doctors worked on his wound. She sat in the chair next to his bed, her white fur pristine again after the station's medical staff had carefully cleaned her, her large eyes watching everything with an intelligence that made him uneasy. The medical bay doors exploded inward. Station security flooded in, weapons drawn, faces pale. Behind them came Owen Hartley, the station administrator, his bureaucratic composure shattered into panic. "Captain Mercer," Hartley said, his voice cracking, "we need you now." Tobias sat up slowly, ignoring the protest from his bandaged ribs. Sarah immediately moved closer, her small hand finding his. "What's happening?" Hartley's face had gone gray. "An alien fleet just arrived, 67 warships. They're demanding we hand over the human who saved their heir." His eyes dropped to Sarah, then back to Tobias. "They're demanding you." The docking bay had been cleared of everyone except security, but Tobias could see thousands of faces pressed against the observation windows as he walked across the deck. Sarah's hand stayed locked in his, her claws pricking through his sleeve. A Talon shuttle waited at the center of the bay, its hull etched with flowing script that looked almost alive in the station's harsh lighting. The boarding ramp stood open, and shadows moved within. "Captain Mercer," Hartley whispered beside him, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Tobias said. They reached the base of the ramp. Sarah pulled free and ran up into the shuttle's interior, disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, Tobias stood alone. Then she emerged. Ashara Velkoth descended the ramp like a predator who'd never known fear. She stood easily 6.5 feet tall, white fur luminous against dark armor that looked both ceremonial and lethal. Her red eyes found him immediately, studying him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. Behind her, 4 warriors fanned out in protective formation. She reached him and began to circle, examining him from every angle. Tobias held his ground, keeping his hands loose, his breathing steady. "You are smaller than I expected," she said, her voice carrying harmonics his translator struggled to render. "I work with what I've got." She completed her circle, stopping directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the patterns in her fur, smell something warm and spiced on her breath. "You placed yourself between my daughter and weapons fire. Why?" "Because she's a kid, because I could." "You sustained injury." "Happens." Ashara reached out, her clawed fingers finding the bandages beneath his shirt, pressing against his wounded side. Pain flared white-hot, and he sucked in a breath but didn't pull away. Her eyes never left his face. "You are still bleeding," she observed. "The doc said I shouldn't be walking around." "Yet you came anyway." She withdrew her hand slowly. "My name is Ashara Velkoth, Supreme Commander of the Talon Imperium's 3rd Fleet. You saved my daughter when my warriors failed. By our laws, you have proven yourself worthy." Her eyes locked onto his. "I am claiming you as my war consort." Tobias's jaw tightened. "I'm not anyone's property." "No, you would be my tactical advisor, my partner." The way she said partner made his stomach clench. "You would stand at my side as we command fleets. Your voice would shape the fate of civilizations." Her eyes dipped to his mouth. "Among other things." "If I refuse?" The temperature seemed to drop. "I will respect your choice," Ashara said softly. "But the Imperium has been expanding for 2 centuries. Humanity's territories lie in our path. A war consort to the Supreme Commander would make your species valuable, allied, protected." She let the implication hang. "Without such a connection?" "That's a threat." "That is reality." She produced a small device, pressing it into his hand. Their fingers touched and heat radiated through him despite the situation. "You have 1 rotation to decide. This device will contact me directly." She turned toward the ramp, then paused. "My daughter has bonded with you. She refused food until I promised to bring you aboard my ship. If you disappear from her life, it will hurt her deeply." Ashara's eyes held something complicated. "I did not create this situation. You did, when you chose to be a hero." Sarah ran to him suddenly, wrapping around his leg, her face pressed against his side. He felt her tears through his clothes. Then she darted back to her mother, who scooped her up with effortless grace. For just a moment, Ashara's mask slipped, and Tobias saw fierce maternal love in those red eyes. Then it returned. She carried Sarah into the shuttle without looking back. The ramp closed, and the craft lifted silently, gliding toward the massive flagship that dominated the viewport like a floating city. Hartley appeared at his shoulder, pale and trembling. What did she want? Tobias looked at the device pulsing softly in his hand. Everything. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of database research. Tobias pulled up everything humanity knew about the Talon Imperium, which wasn't much. First contact 70 years ago, formal but distant relations, relentless expansion since then, species after species joining or vanishing. War consorts appeared throughout their history, tactical advisors, intimate partners, political anchors. The position wielded genuine power for those who held it. They advised on strategy, negotiated treaties, shared their commander's bed and future. It was prestigious, dangerous, all-consuming. 3 hours before his deadline, Tobias closed the database. His wound throbbed despite painkillers. He thought about the wandering star, about simple freight runs and anonymity, about Sarah's tears and small arms around his leg, about humanity's colonies and 67 warships. About Ashara circling him, her hand on his wounded side, her voice making his name sound like a promise. He activated the device. Ashara's holographic face appeared immediately, red eyes finding his. "You've decided. I have questions. If I agree, what happens to my ship, my life? Your vessel joins our flagship. Your life becomes intertwined with mine, but you retain autonomy in most matters. And if I want to leave? War consorts may resign, but such dissolution would end the political alliance. Your choice affects billions." Her mouth curved slightly. "I do not wish to coerce you, Tobias Mercer. I want a partner who chooses to stand with me." She leaned forward. "Come to my flagship. Meet with me privately. If you still wish to refuse after, I will accept your decision and seek alternative arrangements for humanity's protection." "You'd let me go?" "I am a warrior, not a slaver. I want genuine partnership." Her eyes held his. "But I believe I can show you why this is the right choice. For you, for my daughter, for both our peoples." Tobias looked at the device, at her face, watching him with predatory patience, at the two futures stretching before him. He made his choice. Send a shuttle. The Talon shuttle docked with the flagship 20 minutes later. Tobias stood as the airlock cycled, his wound protesting despite the fresh painkillers he'd taken. A young Talon warrior waited on the other side, her orange-striped fur stark against black armor. "Captain Mercer," she said, her translator rendering her voice as precisely neutral. "I am Voresh, second to Commander Velkoth. Follow me." The flagship's interior was nothing like the utilitarian human vessels Tobias knew. The corridors were wide, high-ceilinged, lit by bioluminescent strips that pulsed with a rhythm almost like breathing. Every surface was etched with that flowing script, telling stories he couldn't read. Warriors moved past them with liquid grace, their eyes tracking him with predatory interest. Voresh led him through a maze of passages, each one seemingly identical. Finally, they stopped before a door that looked no different from any other, except for the 2 guards flanking it. "The commander waits within," Voresh said. "You are to enter alone." The door opened before Tobias could respond. He stepped through into quarters that redefined his understanding of the word. The space was massive, easily the size of his entire freighter. One wall was transparent, offering a view of the stars and Meridian Station below. The others displayed holographic projections that cycled through alien landscapes, forests of purple vegetation, oceans under binary suns, cities of elegant spires. Weapons hung on racks like artwork, each one clearly ancient, clearly precious. Ashara stood at the window, her back to him, silhouetted against the stars. "Drink?" she asked without turning. "Sure." She moved to a cabinet, pouring amber liquid into 2 cups carved from something that looked like crystallized bone. When she handed him one, their fingers brushed again, and he felt that same jolt of heat. "To unlikely partnerships," she said, raising her cup. Tobias touched his cup to hers and drank. The liquid burned going down, tasted like honey and lightning, left warmth spreading through his chest. Ashara watched him over the rim of her cup, those red eyes studying every reaction. "You researched us," she said. "As much as I could. And what did you learn?" "That your people have been conquering for 2 centuries, that you're very good at it." Tobias met her gaze. "That war consorts are more than advisors." "Yes." She moved closer, invading his space with the same casual confidence she'd shown on the station. They are partners in every sense, strategic, political, personal. Her clawed finger traced the edge of her cup. Does this trouble you? I don't know yet. Her mouth curved into something that might have been approval. Honesty. Good. She set her cup down, gesturing toward a seating area with furniture that looked both comfortable and alien. Sit. Let me tell you what I see when I look at humanity. Tobias lowered himself carefully into a chair that adjusted to his frame. Ashara remained standing, pacing slowly as she spoke. Your species is young, impulsive. You make decisions based on emotion rather than calculation. She paused, looking at him. These should be weaknesses. By every measure of Talon doctrine, humanity should be easy to defeat. Predictable. But you are not predictable. You adapt faster than any species we have encountered. You think laterally, find solutions in places we would never look. You sacrifice for strangers, which makes no tactical sense, yet somehow gives you strength. Her eyes held his. When I learned a human saved my daughter, I was curious. When I learned he threw himself between her and weapons fire while already wounded, I was intrigued. When I saw you walk across that docking bay, injured and outnumbered but unafraid, I was impressed. She sat beside him close enough that he could feel her body heat. The Talon Imperium needs what humanity possesses, that unpredictability, that adaptability. And I, she paused, find myself wanting what you possess as well. Which is the capacity to act without calculating every consequence, to choose right over safe. Her hand found his, the touch sending electricity up his arm. I have spent my entire life being commander first, mother second, individual last. With you, I might be something else. Tobias looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused, hers furred and tipped with claws that could tear through armor. There's something you're not telling me, he said quietly, about the attack on Sarah, about why you really need someone outside your chain of command. Ashara's hand tightened on his. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she stood, moving to the window. You are more perceptive than I gave you credit for. The attack was too professional, too well equipped. Tobias rose, joining her at the window. And you arrived too fast. You were already close to that sector when it happened. Yes, you knew it was coming. Ashara's reflection in the transparent wall showed conflict warring across her features. Not new, suspected. She turned to face him. My sister Tukrin believes she would make a better commander. She has support among certain factions, warriors who think I am too cautious, too willing to negotiate rather than conquer. Her jaw tightened. 6 months ago, I intercepted communications suggesting she was planning something. Not against me directly, that would be honorable combat, sanctioned by our laws, but against Sarah. Tobias felt ice settle in his gut. She tried to have her own niece killed. If Sarah died, succession law would trigger civil conflict. In that chaos, Takrin could seize control. She would have the heir's death to avenge, the appearance of strength, the support of the aggressive factions. Ashara's voice had gone cold, deadly. I assigned my best warriors to protect Sarah, sent her away on what should have been a safe diplomatic mission. But they were betrayed. Someone in my own command structure sold them out. So you can't trust your own people. Exactly. She looked at him, vulnerability naked in her eyes for the first time. You appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not know how to make, an outsider who proved himself through action. Someone Sarah trusts completely, someone who has no political allegiance to anyone in my fleet. She stepped closer. Someone I could trust to protect what matters most to me. Tobias processed this, understanding clicking into place. You're not just offering me this position because of Talon law, you're offering it because you're desperate. I am practical, Ashara corrected. But yes, desperation is part of it, as is genuine attraction to what you represent. Her hand rose to his face, claws carefully retracted as she traced his jawline. I need you, Tobias Mercer, for my daughter's safety, for my people's future, and her voice dropped lower, for myself. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Tobias could feel his pulse hammering, could see her pupils dilate as she scented his response. If I agree, he said carefully, I need to know everything. Every threat, every political complication. You would have full access to intelligence reports, strategic briefings. You would sit in on command meetings. Her hand slid from his jaw to his neck, warm and present. You would be mine, and I would be yours, complete partnership. And if Takrin makes another move? Ashara's expression hardened into something fierce and beautiful. Then we stop her, together. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his mouth. I am offering you everything, Tobias. Power, purpose, protection for your species, a child who already loves you, a place at my side as we shape the future of half the galaxy. Her lips were inches from his. And me. All of me. If you are brave enough to take it. The moment stretched between them, loaded with promise and danger in equal measure. Tobias could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, could see the vulnerability Ashara was showing him despite every instinct she had to hide it. He thought about Sarah's small arms around his leg, about humanity's colonies vulnerable to an imperium that could erase them, about the loneliness in Ashara's eyes that matched something in his own chest. He thought about the wandering star, empty and waiting, about a life of running cargo and never mattering to anyone. I need one thing, he said. Complete honesty from here on. No more manipulation, no more strategic omissions. If we're partners in everything. Ashara pulled back slightly, studying his face. Then she nodded, a gesture that looked almost like surrender. Agreed. Then yes, Tobias said, I'll be your war consort. Something blazed in Ashara's eyes, triumph, relief, desire, all mixed together. She closed the distance between them, her mouth finding his in a kiss that was both claim and question. He tasted the alien spice of the drink they'd shared, felt the heat of her body against his, the careful way she touched him despite the strength in her frame. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, she rested her forehead against his. The bonding ritual is complex, she said. It will take hours. Are you prepared? What does it involve? Marking, vows, demonstration of trust. Her claws traced patterns on his shoulders, not breaking skin but present. And completion of the physical bond. We do not separate ceremony from consummation among my people. Heat coiled through Tobias despite the clinical way she described it. I'm prepared. Ashara smiled, predatory and pleased, and took his hand. Then let us begin. The bonding ritual began with fire. Ashara led him to a chamber adjacent to her quarters, circular and intimate, lit by floating orbs that cast everything in amber light. At the center stood a brazier carved from dark stone, flames dancing within it without fuel or heat. Around it, symbols were etched into the floor in concentric circles. Remove your shirt, Ashara said, her voice formal now, ritualistic. Tobias pulled it off carefully, mindful of his bandaged wound. Ashara circled him slowly, examining the scars that mapped his life, blade marks from bar fights, burns from engine malfunctions, the fresh bandage where he'd taken a round protecting her daughter. She touched each one, her claws trailing feather-light across his skin, and spoke in her own language. The translator in his ear rendered it as poetry, acknowledgement of his battles, respect for his survival, acceptance of his imperfections. When she finished the circle, she removed her armor piece by piece, revealing the form beneath. Her body was powerful, graceful, every line suggesting both beauty and lethality. Scars marked her too, across her ribs, her shoulder, one that traced her collarbone like a necklace. Now we mark each other, she said, producing a blade from the brazier's base. It glowed faintly, etched with more of that flowing script. The marks signify bond. They will fade but never disappear completely. She stepped close, the blade held between them. This will hurt, she warned. I figured. Ashara's free hand cupped his jaw, holding him steady as she brought the blade to his chest. The first cut was precise, deliberate, and yes, it hurt. She worked with focused intensity, carving a pattern across his pectoral that curved toward his shoulder. Blood welled, but not as much as he'd expected. The blade cauterized as it cut. When she finished, she pressed her palm against the mark, and he felt heat sink deep into muscle and bone. The pain transformed into something else, not pleasure exactly, but connection. He could feel her pulse through the contact, could sense her presence like a weight against his mind. Your turn, she said, offering him the blade. Tobias took it, the handle warm in his grip. Ashara guided his hand to her chest, just above her heart, showing him the pattern he needed to follow. He worked slowly, carefully, hyper-aware of the trust she was showing by letting him put a blade against her skin. She didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched his face as he carved the mark that would bind them. When he finished, he pressed his palm against it as she had done, and felt that same rush of connection. Her heartbeat under his hand, her strength flowing into him, something fundamental clicking into place between them. "Now the vows," Ashara said, her voice rougher than before. They knelt facing each other in the circle, their marked hands clasped together between them. She spoke first, the words ancient and weighted with meaning. The translator struggled, rendering them as something like, "I claim you as shield and sword. I bind you to my blood. I trust you with what I cannot protect alone. I offer you my strength, my power, my body. Stand with me until stars die." Tobias repeated the words back to her, feeling their significance settle over him like a mantle. This wasn't just ceremony. It was genuine oath, genuine bond. When he finished, the marks on their chests flared with heat, and he saw answering fire in Ashara's eyes. "The final component," she said, rising and pulling him to his feet, "requires—" The alarm cut through everything. Red light flooded the chamber. A voice barked in rapid Talon across the ship's communication system, and Tobias saw Ashara's expression shift from intimate to lethal in a heartbeat. She grabbed her armor, pulling it on with practiced speed. "What's happening?" Tobias asked, reaching for his shirt. "Fleet movement, unauthorized." She activated a holographic display, and Tobias saw tactical readouts he only partially understood. 23 ships have broken formation. They are repositioning for attack vector. Attack on what? Ashara's face had gone cold as winter. On the ship, the door exploded inward. Voresh stumbled through, blood matting her orange fur, her weapon drawn. "Commander, Takrin has declared challenge. She broadcasts to the fleet that you are unfit to lead, that you have endangered the air, that a human outsider has corrupted your judgment." Voresh's breathing was labored. "She has loyalists throughout the ship. We have minutes before they breach command deck." Ashara's hand found Tobias's shoulder, squeezed once. "Get Sarah. Voresh will take you to my personal escape craft. Go to human space. Protect her." "Like hell," Tobias said. "You just bound me to you. I'm not running." "This is not your fight. You made it my fight when you asked me to stand with you." He met her eyes. "Besides, you need someone you can trust at your back, someone without political loyalties. That's me." Ashara looked at him for a long moment, something fierce and possessive flashing across her face. Then she nodded sharply. "Voresh, take us to command. Seal all passages behind us." She turned to Tobias. "You want to be my war consort? Then advise me. How do we survive this?" They ran through corridors that had become war zones. Loyal warriors fought pitched battles with Takrin's faction, plasma fire scorching walls, bodies already cooling on the deck. Voresh led them through maintenance passages, her weapon clearing corners with professional efficiency. Tobias's mind raced, pulling apart the tactical situation. How many ships does she have? 23 of 67, Ashara said. And the rest? Uncommitted, waiting to see who prevails before choosing sides. Classic coup dynamics. Tobias had seen it before in smaller contexts, mercenary companies, corporate takeovers. The key was decisiveness. "She's counting on traditional Talon tactics," he said. "Frontal assault, superior numbers, overwhelming force. What if we don't give her that fight?" Ashara glanced at him, interested. "Her ships are repositioning for attack. That takes time, requires coordination. They're following your standard fleet doctrine because that's what they know." They reached a junction, and Voresh held up a fist. "Waiting. Clear." They moved. "What if you did something human? Something completely outside their tactical framework?" "Such as?" Tobias thought about every desperate gamble he'd ever seen work, every time humanity's chaotic thinking had surprised everyone. "Scatter the loyal ships. Break formation entirely. Make it impossible for her to target you as a unified force, then have them come back from random vectors, unpredictable timing, hitting her fleet from angles she can't anticipate because her doctrine doesn't account for organized chaos." Ashara stopped moving, stared at him. that violates every principle of Talon military strategy. A slow smile spread across her face, predatory and delighted. Voresh, get us to command now. They burst into the command deck to find controlled chaos. Officers shouted reports, holographic displays showed Takrin's ships moving into formation, and in the center of it all stood Sarah, flanked by 2 guards, her small face terrified. She saw Tobias and ran to him, slamming into his legs hard enough to hurt his wound. He scooped her up, one-armed, and she buried her face against his neck. "I've got you," he whispered. Ashara was already at the tactical display, her hands flying across controls. "All ships, this is Commander Velkoth, code Sigma 9, break formation on my mark, scatter protocol, random vectors, no pattern coordination, wait for individual targeting orders." She paused, looking at her officers' shocked faces. "Mark." On the display, the loyal fleet exploded outward like seeds from a burst pod, 44 ships suddenly moving in completely different directions, no discernible pattern, no unified front. Takrin's fleet hesitated. Tobias could see it in their formation. They'd been positioned for a coordinated assault on grouped targets. Now those targets had dissolved into chaos. "She's trying to adjust," one officer reported, reassigning target priorities. "Let her," Ashara said. "Every second she spends reorganizing is a second we use." She pulled up ship-specific channels. "Destiny's Edge, you have attack vector on enemy flagship's port flank. Engage when ready. Shadowclaw, enemy cluster at bearing 735, prosecute at will. All ships, weapons free, target at commander's discretion." The battle stopped being about formation and became about individual initiative. Talon warriors were excellent fighters, but they were trained for coordinated fleet action. This was street fighting with starships, chaotic, personal, unpredictable. And it was working. On the display, Takrin's fleet started taking damage. Ships that had been confidently advancing suddenly found themselves under attack from unexpected angles, unable to coordinate defensive fire, their careful formation crumbling. "She's trying to regroup," Voresh said, her voice carrying grudging respect, pulling back to defensive posture. "Don't let her," Tobias said. "She's thinking like a Talon commander. She needs time to analyze, reorganize. Don't give it to her. Press every advantage." Ashara relayed orders, keeping pressure on, denying Takrin the space to think. It was brutal, exhausting, and utterly unlike anything in Talon military doctrine. Then the display changed. Uncommitted ships were moving, not toward Takrin's fleet, toward Ashara's scattered forces. "They're joining us," an officer said, disbelief in her voice. "The neutral ships are declaring for the commander." Ashara's hand found Tobias's shoulder, squeezed hard enough for her claws to prick through his shirt. "They see strength," she said quietly. "They see victory, and they want to be part of it." The tide had turned. Takrin's fleet, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, stopped fighting. On the main display, a face appeared, female Talon, with darker fur than Ashara, red eyes burning with rage and something like grudging respect. "Sister," Takrin said, the word sharp as a blade, "you have surprised me." "Surrender," Ashara said. "You challenged, you lost. Face judgment with honor." Takrin's eyes shifted to Tobias, to Sarah in his arms, back to Ashara. "You have changed. Perhaps that human has made you stronger, or perhaps he has made you weak in ways you do not yet understand." She bared her teeth. "I submit to your authority, for now." The transmission cut. Silence filled the command deck. Then, one by one, Ashara's officers raised their fists to their chests in salute. The gesture spread through the deck like wildfire, acknowledgement and respect in a single motion. Ashara stood at the center of it all, regal and terrible and magnificent. Then she turned to Tobias, and her expression softened fractionally. "Your first advice as my war consort has saved my fleet and my position." She reached out, her hand cupping his jaw in a gesture that was both possessive and tender. "I chose well." Sarah stirred in Tobias's arms, lifting her head to look at her mother. "Is it over?" she asked in her small voice. "For now, little star," Ashara said, stroking her daughter's head. "For now." But her eyes met Tobias's over Sarah's head, and he saw the truth there. This was just the beginning. Takrin was brought before them in chains. The judgment chamber was ancient, its walls carved with the names of every commander who'd ever led the Third Fleet. Ashara sat on a raised platform, Tobias at her right hand, Sarah pressed against his side. The fleet's senior officers lined the walls, witnesses to justice. Takrin stood proud despite her restraints, her darker fur matted with blood from the battle. Her eyes burned with defiance as they swept across the assembled warriors, lingering on Tobias with open contempt. "You risk everything for a human," Takrin said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Our sister species will see weakness. Our enemies will see opportunity." "They will see adaptation," Ashara countered. "They will see that the Talon Imperium is strong enough to embrace what makes us stronger." Her hand found Tobias's, their fingers interlacing. "You tried to murder my daughter. You betrayed your fleet. You endangered our people for personal ambition. What defense do you offer?" "That I acted for the Imperium's future. That your compassion makes you unfit to lead us through the wars to come." Takrin's jaw tightened. "That you have bound yourself to a species too weak to stand with us when it matters." Tobias felt Ashara's claws prick his palm, her anger carefully controlled. He squeezed back, a silent reminder. She'd promised him partnership. That meant his voice mattered here. "May I speak?" he asked quietly. Ashara glanced at him, surprised, then nodded. Tobias stood, feeling every eye in the chamber fix on him. Sarah's hand found his, small and trusting. "You're right that humans are weak," he said, looking directly at Takrin. "Individually, we can't match Talon's strength. Our ships are inferior, our weapons less advanced. By every physical measure, we should be irrelevant." He paused. "But you assumed physical strength was the only strength that mattered. Your strategy relied on Talon doctrine, Talon predictability. When we broke that pattern, your entire plan collapsed. Not because we were stronger, but because we thought differently." He gestured to the officers lining the walls. "Your commander didn't just survive your coup. She won decisively because she did something no Talon leader has done before. She listened to an outsider's perspective. That's not weakness. That's evolution." Takrin's expression flickered, rage mixing with something that might have been grudging acknowledgement. Ashara stood, her presence filling the chamber. "My judgment is this: exile, not death. You will be stripped of rank and placed on a colony world at the Imperium's edge. If you prove your worth through service, you may earn your way back." Her eyes hardened. "But you will never again command in my fleet. And if you threaten my daughter again, mercy will not be offered twice." Takrin's head bowed, the gesture sharp and bitter. "As you command, sister." Guards led her away. When the chamber doors sealed, Ashara's shoulders dropped fractionally, exhaustion showing through her composure. "It is done," she said quietly. Voresh stepped forward, her wound bandaged but her bearing strong. "The fleet awaits your orders, Commander, and—" She hesitated. "The uncommitted ships request formal audience with your war consort. They wish to understand the human who changed Talon military doctrine." Tobias felt his stomach tighten. He'd been focused on surviving the immediate crisis. He hadn't fully processed that he'd just altered the strategic thinking of a civilization that controlled half the galaxy. Ashara's hand found his shoulder. "Later. First, we have unfinished business." Her eyes held promise and heat in equal measure. "Clear the command deck. The commander and her consort require privacy." The officers filed out with knowing looks. Voresh was the last to leave, and she pressed her fist to her chest in salute before the doors sealed. Then they were alone, Tobias, Ashara, and Sarah. "Little star," Ashara said gently, kneeling before her daughter, "you must go with Voresh now. She will prepare your chambers and stay with you tonight." Sarah's ears flattened. "But I want to stay with Tobias." "I know, but your Tobias and I have rituals to complete, important ones." Ashara stroked her daughter's head. "He will be here in the morning. He is part of our family now. He is not leaving." Sarah looked at Tobias, uncertainty in those large eyes. "Promise?" Tobias knelt beside her, ignoring the protest from his wound. "I promise. I'm not going anywhere." She hugged him fiercely, then went to the door where Voresh waited. Before leaving, she looked back once, and Tobias saw hope on her small face that made his chest ache. The door sealed, silence fell. Ashara moved toward him, and the air between them charged with everything that had been interrupted before. The bonding ritual remains incomplete, she said, her voice dropping into something intimate. Are you prepared to finish what we began? Tobias thought about the mark on his chest, still warm and present, about the vows they'd spoken, the connection he could feel thrumming between them, about how she'd trusted his advice in the middle of a coup, how she'd fought for her daughter with the same fierce protectiveness he'd shown. Yes. Ashara closed the distance between them, her hands finding his face, tilting it up to meet her eyes. This will bind us in ways you do not fully understand. You will feel what I feel. Sense my presence across distance. Share my strength and my burdens. Her thumbs traced his cheekbones. There is no undoing this, Tobias Mercer. Once completed, we are bound until death. I know. And you accept this? He covered her hands with his own. I accept you. Something in her expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through her commander's mask. She kissed him then, deep and claiming, and he felt the mark on his chest flare with heat that matched the one on hers. She led him back to her quarters through the door to her private chamber. The space was intimate, dominated by a bed that looked both alien and inviting. Soft light emanated from the walls, casting everything in warm amber. Ashara's armor came off piece by piece, each movement deliberate. Tobias shed his remaining clothes with less grace, hyper-aware of her eyes tracking every motion. When they were both bare, she pulled him close, skin to fur, and he felt the full reality of what they were doing settle over him. No fear, she observed, her hand resting over his racing heart. Terrified, he corrected, but not of you. Of what then? Of failing you, of not being enough, he met her eyes, of hurting Sarah if this doesn't work. Ashara's expression softened into something he'd never seen on her face before, genuine tenderness. You have already proven yourself to both of us. Everything else we will discover together. She guided him to the bed, and what followed was both ritual and revelation. The physical joining was intense, charged with the connection they'd already forged, amplified by the marks that burned on their chests. Tobias felt her in his mind, not as thoughts, but as presence. Her strength flowing into him, his adaptability flowing into her, two separate beings becoming something greater together. When it was over, they lay, tangled together, their breathing synchronized, the marks on their chests glowing softly in the dim light. I can feel you, Tobias said quietly, like you're part of me now. As you are part of me. Ashara's claws traced idle patterns on his shoulder. The bond is complete. You are mine, and I am yours. He turned to face her, reading exhaustion and satisfaction in equal measure on her face. What happens now? Now we rebuild. Takrin's faction must be reintegrated. The fleet needs to understand our new tactical approaches. And humanity, she paused, must be brought into formal alliance with the Imperium. That's going to be complicated. Yes, her mouth curved, but you are my ambassador to your people. Your voice will carry weight they could never ignore. Tobias thought about Earth, about the frontier colonies, about how humanity would react to learning one of their own had become consort to an alien commander. Some will see it as betrayal. Some will see it as salvation, Ashara's hand found his, their fingers interlocking, and both will be correct. They lay in comfortable silence for a long moment. Then Tobias felt something shift in the bond between them, a question, unspoken but present. What, he asked. I am not accustomed to partnership, to sharing power, sharing decisions. She looked at him. I will make mistakes. I will revert to commanding rather than consulting. You must tell me when I do this. And you have to actually listen when I tell you. Agreed, she pulled him closer. This is strange territory for both of us. Yeah, Tobias pressed his forehead to hers, but we'll figure it out. Morning came with Sarah bursting through the door, Voresh trailing behind her with an apologetic expression. The child launched herself onto the bed, wedging between them with the confidence of someone who knew she was wanted. You stayed, she said, looking at Tobias with such joy it made his throat tight. I promised. Sarah curled against him, her small hand finding the mark on his chest, tracing it with curiosity. What's this? It means I'm part of your family now, Tobias said, if that's okay with you. She looked at her mother, then back at him, and smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Okay. Ashara watched them both, something fierce and possessive in her expression. When Sarah started asking questions about breakfast, she rose to call for food, leaving Tobias alone with the child. Are you going to protect Mama like you protected me? Sarah asked quietly. Yes. Good. She needs someone. Sarah's ears twitched. She pretends she doesn't, but she does. Tobias pulled her closer, this small alien child who'd somehow become his responsibility, his purpose. We'll protect each other, all of us. 3 days later, Tobias stood on the observation deck, watching Meridian Station grow larger in the viewport. The wandering star had been brought aboard the flagship, repaired and upgraded with Talon technology. It sat in the hangar bay, ready for the journey to Earth he'd be making soon. Ashara joined him, her presence in his mind before she physically arrived. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. Second thoughts, she asked. About us? No. He covered her hands with his. About whether I can actually pull off being a diplomat? Constantly. You will adapt. It is what humans do best. She turned him to face her. The fleet respects you. The officers seek your counsel. Sira loves you. And I, she paused, something vulnerable crossing her face. I need you. Not just as war consort, as partner, as the balance I did not know I lacked. Tobias kissed her, slow and deep, feeling their bond hum with contentment. When do we tell Earth? Tomorrow. I will send a delegation with you. We will negotiate formal alliance, trade agreements, mutual defense. Her eyes held his. And you will show them that cooperation between our species is not just possible, but powerful. No pressure. She smiled, predatory and pleased. You have handled everything else I have given you. You will handle this. The doors opened and Sarah ran in, followed by Voresh. The Meridian Administrator is requesting communication, Voresh reported. Apparently news of our war consort has spread, and Earth's government is demanding answers. Tobias exchanged a look with Ashara. Well, he said, here we go. She took his hand, and Sarah grabbed the other one, and together they walked toward the command center, toward the future they'd built from instinct and desperation, and something neither of them had expected to find. The human freighter captain who'd thrown himself between a child and gunfire had become something greater, bridge between civilizations, consort to a commander, father to an heir, and partner to a warrior who'd learned that strength came in forms her people had never imagined. Behind them, the stars stretched endless and full of possibility. Ahead of them, 2 civilizations waited to discover what they could become together. And between them, a bond forged in fire and blood and choice powerful enough to reshape the galaxy.